There are some things that humans exhibit that aren't so obviously selectable, if you want, for a better word. Like, haven't so obviously emerged from an evolutionary process, and maybe aren't as present in other animals because of that.
Yeah, that on the surface appear to be pointless for trying to better your role as a breeding organism. So trying to pass on your information, your genetic information. So humans do like loads of bizarre things like paint, like art
generally. So like painting, like music, like making films. I don't know, all this stuff. Like, what purpose does it serve? In an evolutionary context. And is that an example of something that differentiates us? The fact that we have this trait.
So this stuff is now going to get more tricky.
Yeah, it is.
because it's not so clear cut. I mean, for a start, there are some animals which in a kind of borderline. Is it art? Is it not?
Yeah, it's way. I mean, for a start, art is like when you start thinking about
art is a hard definition anyway.
Yeah, it is, and it's a bit crazy when you start thinking about it. What we do, like,
I'm gonna look for a quick definition.
Yeah, sure, go for it. So it's such a weird trait to have, a behavioural trait to have, like just going out of your way to do a painting or something just purely because it looks good and other humans think it looks good.
Yeah, so the definition of art, according to, I mean, this is maybe not be the definition, it's just the one that first came up: the various branches of creative activity such as painting, music, literature, and dance. So I mean, that doesn't really.
It's creativity, though, isn't it? Like that's kind of what it is.
Well,
right?
Creativity. You could define creativity though in still like a creative hunting method.
Sure, or like science is like highly creative as well.
Yeah, sometimes. I just mean in terms of that doesn't create any art.
Yes.
In a
yeah.
sense.
So scientific creativity doesn't create art under that definition.
But creativity is used in just like a leopard trying to work out like a creative way of trying to like separate a young animal from the pack.
Yeah,
there's some creativity there.
And that actually like strikes almost to the heart of like why it possibly exists as an evolutionary emergence like property.
Yes,
because if you are creative, like if you are a creative human, then you're probably going to be good at solving problems that are like necessary to your survival.
Yes,
like hunting, like whatever. So art is like possibly a way of advertising that creativity.
Quite possibly.
I mean, we're talking here, and like obviously, if someone who does a painting or like writes some music or something, they aren't thinking in these terms at all.
No, of course.
This is just a way of explaining like how it could possibly have emerged through evolution, in the same way that like any other animal behavior does.
Yes. If you consider humans like back out a second and consider them as an objective species, you're like looking under a microscope and seeing some humans like behaving in certain ways. You've got to kind of consider them in that sense to try and really get to the nub of why people are doing things. People clearly they do art because they enjoy doing it, or they want to do it. But like, why do they want to do it? Is a question that potentially has an answer in evolution. Say potentially, I mean, there's no reason why everything else.
Yeah, to suggest that it has come from some other just like a spark of creativity was put into humans somehow for no reason is like, well, that goes against everything that we understand about science and our biology and evolution.
Exactly, as if there was something that was kind of suddenly appeared, a magic ingredient that suddenly appeared at some point when we were kind of moving from apes to humans. Clearly, there's a gradational boundary there and a big difference between the two, but the processes driving them have not changed, as in we're still biological organisms.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore are driven by our biological processes. Obviously, there's loads of like socially inducted kind of behaviours and processes that affect our biology. It's not to say that it's all nature, not nurture. It's absolutely a mix of both of them.
Yeah, sure.
But in terms of understanding these kind of traits in a sense, as if you're looking at humans as a species, then there's no reason to suspect that creativity is some like spooky like extra ingredient that's been mixed into the mix. Do we see anything? So that's not really. We're talking about creativity there.
Yeah.
But art is an outlet of creativity.
Yes.
and we can see like why certain creative traits, so creatively hunting or whatever, would benefit organisms. But why is there any? If you could separate, if you were saying that you were separating animals from humans based on the fact that humans create art, is there any examples in which in animals in which you can see a somewhat rudimentary version of art in any shape or form? Not just creativity, like as in making like artistic things.
Yeah. Well, kind of. I mean, you kind of have to stretch it a little bit.
You do.
There's certainly some animals have some weird behaviors, but they are usually tied directly to reproductive sex.
Yes.
So, like, I mean, this is like in the same way that like a peacock has like a shitload of massive feathers on its tail.
Yeah.
That serves no function other than to attract mates. Like it actually makes its life pretty shit. Like it makes it slow, like hard to hide. It's really super visible to predators and everything. Like it's investing a lot in that tail purely because it attracts mates.
Yes.
And gives it a better chance of reproducing. So that's what you call sexual selection. So examples of art, there are animals that do things in a similar way to that.
That are actually involve like
that are purely just to attract mates.
Yes.
Really. So there's a thing called the bowerbird.
I was about to say, okay. I was just about to say,
yeah.
In a way, like a peacock can't use tools. Okay, it has like its tail, its plumage, and that's how it attracts partners. But with animals that can use more complex tools, like humans.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll talk about this in a bit, but like. If you're going to create art and things, there's probably some underlying or primitive driver, maybe only a small part of a primitive driver, in which by creating art in a human society, you are more likely to pass on your genetic material. As in, like, peacocks have feathers to show off their feathers. I suppose it's more about human bodies though, like what human bodies look better. That's more analogous. Like,
that is. But I think there are
analogies.
There.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm not saying that like all humans just make art to like get laid.
No.
But
or at least
But the behaviour of creating art could possibly have emerged as a way of advertising creativity.
Yes.
And actually, like, I'll come back to the animal examples in a second. But actually, think about it. People who are artists, like famous artists. Well, the fact that such a thing exists anyway. Like some of the most famous people in the world are just artists, like musicians, actors, whatever. Like
anything. Yeah.
These people have a lot of power and are looked up to and revered, and like some people find them attractive, whatever. Like, but
they're absolutely. They are objectively more attractive to the opposite sex of whatever sex they are, or the same sex.
Yeah.
Because of their standing in society that is gained from their art, and therefore I have an easier time in terms of acquiring food and everything, and an easier time to acquire money. They tend to get very wealthy from it, and also of course they're more likely to mate.
Yeah, they are ultimately. Yeah,
straight up more. There are more attractive humans because of that.
Yeah. I think art in human society is probably more complex than the animal example.
No, it's just that there is some input probably.
Yes, exactly. That's the right way.
I'm not sure the proportion of it in terms of, but that seems like that in terms of evolutionary biology, that makes total sense that there is a sort of sexual selection.
Yeah.
That there was a sexual selection going on in our ancestors that has led to this behaviour.
Yeah.
Being so prominent in human society.
So
it has a contribution.
The thing about like advertising creativity. When you look at some of the animal examples, so bowerbirds, as I mentioned earlier, are basically
they are
like
nuts.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard of these things, just like Google them and look at the images, because they build these incredible structures to attract mates. Like the male bowerbirds build these like huge like sort of hut thing, like
made out of grass and stuff.
Made out of sticks and grass, and then in front of
which isn't just a nest.
No, it's not a nest.
No,
they don't live in it.
No,
it's just there to like. Hey, look how awesome I am! Look how creative I am. Yes. I guess in a way. Like how good I am at like arranging sticks.
They literally do that. Don't they?
They get like coloured objects like flowers and seeds and things, and like group them by colour.
They sort of make like a little kind of like garden. Like a human would make like a sort of pretty garden with flowers and stuff. They pick up like bottle tops.
They do, yeah.
And they have like it's like sorted into colours, like different
colours.
Yeah,
like it's all like meticulously sorted into colours.
Yeah.
And like there's videos of them doing it, and they kind of like hop around in that really bird-like way, just sort of looking at everything, and then pick something up. Oh, it's not right there. I'm gonna move it over here and just put it down again. Like stand back and have a look. Like
in a very similar way to which a human would paint or arrange a sculpture or paint a painting or something.
Yeah, and obviously this is much more like direct. Its impact on mating, reproductive success is much more direct. It's just like, okay, I made this, come and have sex with me, basically.
Yeah.
Which is not really what happens with art, human art. But human art might have emerged from the same kind of selection pressures that this behaviour in that bird has emerged from, even though it's much more complex and much more abstracted from it. And the reason it's much more complex and much more abstracted for it is probably just because we're much more complex animals and our society is much more complex.
Yeah.
And maybe there's also influences that art has, other than just like making you more likely to mate or making you more like powerful in the society.
Exactly. Well, it helps knit together society. Like people become friends, or they find people who are like-minded through similar choices in liking music or liking films or lots of different aspects of like hobbies and things that are related to art and creativity. It, in a way, kind of helps maintain the sort of psychological health of society, helps knit it together. There's
undeniable benefits in having like-minded individuals who share interests and will they basically become friends through this kind of thing, and they'll have each other's back and things like that. So
in a very complicated society like humans, then it ends up being a beneficial thing to have complex art systems, complex cultural diversity.
So something that could have potentially emerged through just sexual selection in its rudimentary beginnings gets reinforced by all these other like beneficial effects that it has on society.
I mean, you go to see a film with friends that you all really like, and it makes you feel good. It kind of, and it helps you. Maybe another thing about art, it helps art kind of reflects society. It like helps you understand society.
Sure.
It's like I think there's a saying that's something like, art is not truth, but it helps you understand truth, or something like that.
Right.
And I think that's true. Like satire, kind of lots of kind of political ideologies are expressed through art in places where they're maybe suppressed.
I can see that.
Films are hugely influential on like in society's general choices and moral kind of development.
Absolutely, yeah.
So art probably plays a role as well in maintaining a kind of egalitarian society in which we are more accepting of people generally, and more likely to select people on merit as opposed to what they look like.
Yeah.
Art helps integrate everyone in society, so that the best people are allowed to, regardless of where they come from, maybe rise to where they should be in society. As opposed to older. Maybe it helps something like that. That's to do with communication and loads of other things as well. But certainly art contributes again in these different ways.
Probably
to the sort of lubricating society.
Yeah, to the gradual sort of like moral kind of evolution of human society.
So what I guess we're arguing is that art is a beneficial thing to have in society, and that's why it exists.
Yes.
And it has its roots in kind of just sexual selection and these types of more basic parts of evolution. But when you get to a highly abstracted society, you end up with all sorts of other reinforcing functions.
Yeah, and it might be hard to like trace the thread between a bowerbird building like a little like palace of sticks in order to like find a mate.
It's not
to
just
trace the thread between that and like I don't know, the Beatles or something. Might be like a really hard like mental leap to make. But I think we are arguing that there is a process there in the emergence of those two behaviours that was similar.
That was definitely similar. So in terms of saying, does art separate is art a totally uniquely human thing? Trait. I'm not sure you can entirely separate those behaviours from animals. There's nothing entirely unique about the behaviour as such, as in its roots. But I guess nothing is. In terms of there are the odd example
we certainly have it. We certainly exhibit artistic behavior, unlike any other species.
Absolutely,
way more complex, way more like rich and diverse, and beyond like its possible original sort of purposes.
Yes, like the way a peacock's feathers is beyond its original purposes.
Yeah, but it's not because the fact that you can sort of trace it back to its beneficial evolutionary roots means that it's not just something that's like just appeared in humans that would never existed in anything else.
Yes.
It has a history. It's emerged in the same way that every other behavior has.
The other thing about art and culture is that if we think about like non-human species, many. Like things like Neanderthals displayed culture. I mean, I suppose they're human in a way.
Yeah, kind of. I guess they represent like the closest to us in that gradational kind of boundary.
Yeah.
It's not even really a boundary, but like,
Yeah.
Out of that kind of list of really similar human-like species, they are probably the closest to us.
Yeah, and so you can see that kind of development of art happening in more rudimentary, less complex ways as you get towards humans back in the ancestors and closely related species that have died out now in humans. You don't really see it in terms of, I don't think there's any evidence of like true art in chimps and those kinds of things. You know, people teach monkeys how to paint and stuff, but that's
not really like a chimpanzee behavior. It's like a human behavior been taught to a chimp.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just copying. Basically.
No, you don't. Which is interesting. It shows that there wasn't really a need for them to be like that. Which is in itself is kind of slightly puzzling.
But there are cultural traits and things. Like art's about culture as well, isn't it? About passing and trading culture and stuff. And so different troops of chimps behave in certain ways that I suppose it's probably not art, but they display their kind of creativity in different ways depending on which troops of chimps.
Yeah. And the fact that you don't see it so much in chimps, maybe is an argument that the sexual selection side of it is just a small part of it. Like you would expect to see it maybe more in groups of animals like that if it was purely just explained by sexual selection.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know. I mean, it's a very complex thing to get your head around.
It is.
And it might just be that you reach a certain level of, either certain size or certain level of complexity in social groups where suddenly, like, you've hit a threshold. Now it becomes like really super beneficial to have this like outlet and like advert of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, it might be that we're talking. If you think about like a non-civilization building organism and a civilization building organism, like a civilization building organism may have to like evolve these more complex artistic things in order to, at that level of complexity. We were sort of talking about this earlier. For society to work in a way that's psychologically healthy, and simply because nothing else has got to that level, we don't see that, but we still see the origins of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So basically, what we're saying is, there was no like magic kind of like art is like a uniquely human thing. It's just a trait that's a far more like extrapolated from animals, and we do see like bowerbirds. I mean, they really. Yeah, those things look like pieces of art. Yeah, like they literally look like pieces of art. It's not like they're kind of just doing the same thing every time. They all do like different versions. They sit back and kind of like rearrange things and look. And it's if there is any input from sexual selection into human art, then the thing that bowerbirds do is exactly the same essentially as that input. And there is probably a reasonable, like a significant input in sexual selection in art, and therefore it's not really uniquely human. It's just uniquely human to have been this complicated.
And it's amazing. We said this before, but it's amazing how much power doing art can give you in human society. Like the fact that we revere artists more than actual like real leaders, you know.
Exactly. So people like politicians are generally not thought of as highly as someone's favorite artist. Even things like like scientists or engineers or
people who've actually contributed massively to like human development, human sort of progress.
Sure, people will say yes, of course, a scientist doing cancer research is more important than a pop star.
Yeah.
But like in terms of their day-to-day life, like which stories are they reading about, what media are they consuming, where they're spending more time, most people, researching or not researching, but kind of reading about and consuming, and talking about. Really, that's the key thing. Communicating about creative people, not talking about obscure. People will get into. Well, there's lots of different types of people, but
So that you just have these. Art gives you power.
Yeah.
In human society, influence. As well, which could also be part of its.
If we're talking about that, like intelligence arms race, being a better, more creative, like in the early days of, when living in caves and stuff, it would help you climb that social hierarchy ladder.
Yeah.
In terms of other things that then are like kind of tricky, kind of art-like behaviours that we see in humans, that people use to differentiate humans and animals. Maybe like religion is one. That kind of like ritualistic behaviour.
Yeah. So what? Yeah, tricky. What is religion really? Like, what is it? Is it a way of trying to explain like the world, the universe?
Yeah.
Is that what it actually is, like fundamentally, or is it something else? Like
I think it's a mixture of two things.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's a mixture of what you just said.
Yeah.
And also about kind of cultural identity, and kind of behaviours within.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it's probably So it probably emerged in like in like proto-humans, like early human groups, or something like similar to it, as a way of like keeping a group cohesive and
exactly, yeah,
like common, again, like we're talking about like common ground, like
it's exactly. So it's about like tribalism.
Yeah.
In a way,
exactly.
It's about like creating identifiable cultural traits with your own like people or your own like organisms. Yeah. People that are like-minded and that support you in a way. In some ways, and it has overlaps into art as well in terms of its kind of, in terms of what it is and its function in society.
Yeah.
You could argue it's more like divisive than art.
Yeah,
but
maybe there was a time when having divisions between groups was beneficial probably beneficial. Because above a certain size group, like you can't support them through hunter-gatherer like methods.
Yeah.
So it was good to have like a reason to like fight the other group, because good to have a reason to like not trust them, or to like just kind of consider them like less than human, I guess. Like that's the way that the
less
old
important
school,
than you,
less important than you,
than your like close relatives.
Yeah, like Old Testament sort of crazy old Bible stuff. Like kill the Amalekites and stuff. Like that kind of like, it's fine. You can justify like killing other humans if you think that they're like less, like not part of like God or the God's plan or whatever. And
in a way, therefore, it's kind of about social order as well.
Yes.
About creating rules that can't be broken, and therefore helping society in its early days maybe function in that way.
Yeah.
Function like properly, because again, it's like maybe you go down like an anarchy route. It's like so I'm not saying, what I'm definitely not saying is that without those kind of like religious undertones, you would have like a totally immoral anarchistic society.
Sure. No, of course.
Because a lot of those religious things were built on like our more fundamental kind of like emotions and morals and altruism.
Something like the moral code or whatever that governs like our interactions.
Yeah.
Probably is underneath. Like religion is like something that sits on top of it,
or sits, or that's one of the contributing things that what religion forms.
Yeah.
So it also comes from less nice places in terms of like not just emotions, but like controlling like one individual trying to control others.
Yes. It's quite useful
for its own benefit.
Yeah.
So in a way, although there's no direct like, there are analogues in the animal world, but not real. There's obviously no like religious like crows or whatever. But like
that would be mad.
There's no evidence of primates or other apes looking doing like true, like what you would describe as like blatantly, obviously religious.
Yeah, like superstitious kind of like belief in something.
Yes.
Exhibiting like belief in something that like
there might be superstitious in a way, in like in like placing hopes and dreams into an individual that doesn't have those hopes and dreams. But exactly what those are is they probably don't. There's no evidence of animals thinking that one of their own, or there's like a higher power to the world or whatever necessarily. I mean, they just they just kind of try and work with their environment.
But you're right. There like in like again like chimp groups and stuff. You have like a leader.
Yes.
That is a chimp, right? Yes. This is another one of the chimps, but that has, because of their standing in the group, has like the others look up to them as having almost like godlike abilities in some ways. Yes,
and you mean that in like not literally. They're not thinking the chimp's going to start like causing lightning strikes and stuff.
But okay, all I mean by that is that leader chimp is capable of protecting them in a way that possibly he's not capable of doing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a placement of hope into, or kind of security over the top, over the odds of what the actual reality is.
Yeah.
So a chimp might, they might think of this chimp can protect them against almost anything, like it's
lightning
kind of,
or something.
Yeah. Well, so you literally see behavior in chimps that during lightning storms and things, you'll have the dominant like male, and it tends to be the male in these types of the biggest, most male. Aggressive animal. It will do like bizarre behaviors during like lightning strikes, where it will be all the other chimps will be hiding under trees and like sheltering, whereas the dominant male will be going like crazy, like trying to like tear trees down.
Yeah, like sort of showing the storm who's boss, basically.
In a way, because everything else is cowering, you could see it as a stretch, and maybe that the analog is closer to something like how we like political like leaders and things, as in like, but it's not really closer to like democratically elected leaders. It's closer to is like cults of personality, like dictatorship of cults of personality. Like you see in sort of like North Korea.
Yes.
And those cults of personality, they engender beliefs, superstitious beliefs about those leaders.
Yes. And maybe that comes from the same sort of capacity in human, in the human brain, human consciousness, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That religion does, kind of like the projecting. I mean, this is all kind of a bit of a stretch, but projecting that kind of like belief that this person or being or whatever has powers that can influence your life and like, I don't know, like protect you, keep you safe, or the opposite, like, unleash like vengeance on you in some way or something like that. So yeah, you're right. It might be more analogous to like cult of personality leaders.
Yes.
But it's possible that need to kind of believe in that kind of like supreme power.
Yes, exactly.
Comes from the same place as religion.
And also in chimps, you find that aspect, that's one aspect of religion, of course.
Yeah.
But the other aspect is kind of like revering the universe. Yeah. And you see ritualistic behaviors in chimps and things. If they get to certain like waterfall and spots that they're not like short on water or anything, but they'll behave in very like sort of almost tribal like ceremonial ways, and they'll kind of do like strange like swinging patterns, get very excitable, and they go to this like watering hole at, like, every day at a certain time and do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And again, it's
almost like kind of giving thanks to the water hole.
Yeah,
which is way.
Yeah, which is obviously a stretch to say they're giving thanks, but what they're actually doing is like a very early way of kind of a very primitive kind of tribal behavior, like a tribal sort of ritualistic behavior.
Yeah.
And so that kind of I don't know if the real like true reverence for the universe really exists. You never tell that with chimps, but certainly an excitement that goes along with certain natural phenomenons that are non-biological.
Yeah.
And therefore those things feed into what religion kind of is in humans, or a placement, or like a beneficial placement in believing that a higher power is able to help you through your life.
Yeah,
it's it's a psychological health thing.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, and even without these possible very very faint analogies in animals, even without that, it's kind of easy or logical to see how religious traits might evolve in human populations.
Yes, exactly. So in higher, again, in terms of human-related ancestors, Neanderthals, and further back, certainly showed rudimentary superstitious, kind of tribal behaviours.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, there's even some evidence that Naledi, the Homo...
the one where they found loads of skeletons in that cave in South Africa.
Yes.
They've obviously been burying their dead there.
Yeah, there's not agreed in the anthropological world whether that is actually what was happening. But they basically,
really? Okay.
it that's one of the considerations. The people who... So essentially what they did is they found like a cave.
Yeah.
Which contained a load of bones.
Yeah.
And the bones were all in one place, and there was no evidence, no environmental evidence in any of the geology, any of the sediments that suggested they were like washed there by a flood or they all died at once. And it was they're all skeletons of one particular hominid.
Yeah. Non-human sort of primate.
Yeah, exactly. It may be a direct ancestor of us. It may not be. I don't think it's thought that it is a direct ancestor, but it had a common ancestor not that long ago with us. And it was like a rudimentary human.
Yeah.
And this is way before we expected any like cultural behaviours to be present in non-humans.
Yeah, like these kind of complex cultures.
They seem to be. The suspicion is that they were ritually burying their dead in this cave. So, even if that's not true, but there's certainly these types of behaviours existed before anatomically modern humans existed.
Yeah.
In proto-humans.
Yeah. Sure.
So they're absolutely an evolutionary thing. It's just whether can you separate humans from animals with that one distinction
based on just religion?
Is you can separate them in terms of obviously the religion and those behaviours are far more complex, but you can't really separate them in terms of it's not like there's nothing again like imbued into humans that's obviously not present in any other animal.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe even calling it religion is already like because religion is quite a specific.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Religion
You've
maybe
already
made
the problem for yourself because you're asking the wrong question.
Yeah, that is possibly the wrong question. So like religion is the human manifestation of this trait.
These particular number of traits, exactly.
These numbers of traits. Yeah. And especially as the human brain began to get more complex and we were capable of understanding the world more, it was easier to have like explanations for things by like just imagining them or like invoking like this higher power that
and also easier to keep social order and
exactly, and
also
so it kills lots of birds with one stone basically.
And this again trait. I mean you bring people together. It wasn't just about social control, but it was about social cohesion. In early days when it was when people were less civilized in a way. Religion again, a bit like art, seems to have there's a gradational boundary. It's not like we don't see anything that contributes to art or religion in animals.
And it's not something that was just suddenly appeared in humans. I mean, it does seem to have like a thread that you can trace back, like an evolutionary history.
What about in terms of I suppose this is more basic, but like concept of like being like yourself, like a concept of
do you mean like
well, I suppose we see in animals, don't we? Lots of animals like recognize them. Some animals can recognize themselves in mirrors, right?
Yeah,
so there's a standard test that's done on. I can't remember what it's called.
They like paint a dot on them or to stick a sticker on them or something.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And if the animal sees itself in the mirror and realizes that it's got this like dot on them and they try and get it off, then they pass that test, I think.
So they'll do something like and to control for it properly, they'll have like an orangutan or something.
Yeah.
And they'll like take 5 orangutans or 1 orangutan multiple times or whatever, and they'll get a pen and stick a dot on its head.
Yeah.
Okay. And then like maybe an hour later they'll show the orangutan in a mirror. Its reflection.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll have simply used a pen that doesn't work, so there's no dot on the orangutan's head.
And it's just like,
just looks at it, bored. I think orangutans can pass this. Maybe not orangutans, but whatever apes can pass this. Certain apes can pass it.
Yeah.
and if they'll look at themselves, the animals that can pass it, and start trying to wipe the dot off their head.
If it's there.
If it's there.
Yeah.
If it's not there, they won't.
Yeah.
Animals that can pass it. So things like it's apes, not crows, magpies. Isn't it?
Magpies, I think. Like, some really weird animals have passed it, like ants.
Yes, ants can pass it, which is really surprising.
Yeah, like an ant will look in the mirror and be like, "Oh, that's me. Oh, I've got a dot on my head."
Well, yeah. So they'll again do the same thing. Put a touch of ink on like the mandible of the ant, and it will start trying to clean it off if it looks at its own reflection, which is mental.
Which is really crazy. Because quite a lot of animals don't, like, much higher intelligent animals than ants.
Dogs don't do it.
Don't tend to do it. Dogs, show a dog itself in the mirror and it's just like,
it might bark
at it and try and attack
Most dogs
it,
are just totally bored by it.
But yeah, they're not really picking up on the fact that it's them at all.
Yeah.
So that's a weird trait.
There's definitely.
Is that a concept of self though? I mean, what I mean is it possible to have a concept of self like it's a bit of a grey area topic, but almost I guess what I'm almost getting at is like consciousness. We'll get onto that in a minute, I think.
No, we talk about that now, really. I mean, obviously in terms of the mirror test, there seems to be, in terms of that particular measurement of self, there's no boundary between humans and animals.
Yeah,
there's lots of animals that can do it, lots of humans that can do it.
Yeah.
And in fact, humans aren't able to pass that test until they're about 20, 24 months old.
Oh right, yeah, okay.
So when they're younger, they can't pass that.
Which is human babies are useless.
Yeah, they do like weird.
They're basically just fetuses. I mean, that's essentially what they are. Our development, our birth development, like backtracked loads as our heads grew, because of our brain sizes.
Yes,
because we needed to give birth
big a head to come out.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So you needed to give birth to like younger and younger fetuses.
Yeah, or more.
So like human babies are just
useless,
like, totally dependent, useless kind of.
So it takes them a while to acquire that ability.
Yeah.
It's quite old. I mean, I think they start showing it at like 18 months or something, and then by like 20 to 24 months, it's something like 50-60% of them are then able to recognise themselves and pass that test. But anyway, that's not that you're saying. That's not the concept of self.
Yeah. So self-awareness maybe is a better way of putting it than consciousness itself. But like the idea that
this is getting really like philosophical. We're going to try and treat it in a very objective, scientific way.
Yeah.
But you do have to think about it in terms of logical kind of philosophy in some cases, because there's not much hard data to go on.
Sure.
You just have to use analogies and things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this idea that consciousness or self-awareness is the thing, is the crux of being human.
Yes, I think that there's no reason to suspect that if you look back at human evolutionary history, you go back to like we were talking about these different hominids that we came from. There's no reason, it makes absolutely no sense, evolutionary speaking, that at some point like a human became conscious.
Yeah.
That it is just a gradational boundary. That these kind of intelligence arms race that we talked about the week before led to an increasingly complex set of understanding of yourself in society, yourself in the universe, etc., etc. At no point was there like an imbuement of consciousness into the human mind.
No.
And that consciousness isn't like a physical force as such, and therefore because of that, you simply trace that line back. A human brain and human conscious experience simply traces all the way back to what a bacteria does. That it is, but it's highly, highly evolved from that. Of course, like significantly evolved.
If you think about what actually a conscious brain is, a set of inputs, so sight, sound, smells, touch, whatever, are going in and being processed, and a reaction is being produced based on them. And the processing side of that, obviously in humans, has become vastly complex in the way that we are now able to imagine other inputs. We're able to like abstract and think about concepts that aren't immediately just being displayed to us. But that, what I've just described, inputs, processing and outputs, is fundamentally the same as what a bacterium will do.
Yes.
As it senses its environment and reacts to that.
Yeah, and in
the processing in a bacterium is obviously just a cascade of chemical reactions.
Yeah.
But at no point between the kind of primitive single-celled organisms 4 billion years ago and us can you define a point at which suddenly it's no longer just reacting to stimuli, and now it's conscious. There's no point in that gradation where suddenly that happens. Even like rudimentary animals that were multicellular, moved around and stuff, as nervous systems began to develop, all those nervous systems were doing was starting to centralize stimuli, centralize the processing of stimuli. And that's all a brain ever has been. And so as you were saying earlier, it's impossible to like find that point because there isn't a point at which because consciousness is consciousness, what we're experiencing is essentially just a very, 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 very complex, highly evolved version of processing, reacting to stimuli, and consequently
that would not we wouldn't consider that to be a difference between an animal like an ape and us. No. Particularly again, same thing. It's a highly evolved process. It's a highly evolved ours is a much more complex version is all. That's all we're sort of saying, I suppose.
And if you think about that a lot, like it does blow your mind a little bit.